Let's continue talking about faults, which are the brittle type of crustal deformation. When we talk about faults with mostly vertical offset, all of the things at the top apply. They're called dip-slip faults. They can produce fault scarps, and we describe them by using the terms hanging wall and foot wall. Let's talk about what reverse faults look like when we're talking about this. So with reverse faults, the way that we describe reverse faults is that the hanging wall is moving up with respect to the foot wall. So here is the fault running through here. And as we can see here, this yellow layer here used to be at the same level as this yellow layer, but it is no longer because the hanging wall has been pushed up the fault ramp, up the fault, with respect to the foot wall. This requires strong compressional forces. So you can imagine, unlike the normal fault where things are kind of sliding down a ramp, here we're kind of pushing rocks up a ramp. So we need extremely strong compressional forces like we would find with continent collision or something like that, where the tectonic forces are pushing two things together. And in those types of cases, that's where we would expect to find these reverse faults. Because it's so hard pushing these rocks up a ramp, oftentimes these faults tend to be lower angle faults. They're not very steep, but they're at a lower angle. And oftentimes they follow layers of sedimentary rocks, because if they can find a weak layer of sedimentary rocks, they can just push the hanging wall right over top of that weak layer and have the movement occur along the reverse fault in that way. Sometimes in this case they're called thrust faults, which just means a low angle reverse fault. And but once again, the same sort of process is going on. We have strong compressional forces, things are coming together, and the movement on the fault is described as the hanging wall moving up with respect to the foot wall. One good example of such an area is the Rocky Mountain front of Montana, where you're out in the plains of Montana and all of a sudden the Rocky Mountains are just right in front of you there. That's because there's a thrust fault at the base of the mountains. They've been pushed from further to the west towards the east and on a thrust fault, and that's why they're in their current position. So they didn't start nearly where they are today. They've been pushed along fault planes for miles and miles in order to get to the location where the Rocky Mountain front is today. Obviously, these are very strong compressional forces that are forming these types of thrust or reverse faults.